Okay, so today is kind of the official end of the React curriculum. So I'm going to show you guys how to use Docker to deploy a React application. Um, Actually, not that hard. We've kind of walked through a very similar process a couple times before, where we'll use Docker to create an image, and then we'll just push it up to Docker Hub, your personal Docker Hub repo, and then we'll go to AWS account, create a free tier EC2 instance, which will be the server, and then you install Docker on the server, and then you just run your container. So we're gonna do the same thing there. So this will just be React, and then next week we are going to go over combining React with Django. So you'll have Django backend. So most things we've done so far have just been kind of a single project, or like a single component to the application. You have Django or you have React. And then next week we'll combine them together. And I will also show you how to do that with Docker. So you'll be able to deploy a complete application, and we'll have React, Django, and a Postgres database. Okay. So you can go over this. My computer is okay. You can take a look at this README. I'm not gonna exactly. I mean, it's fairly straightforward, so you can walk through it after. And your challenge for today will you'll basically have to do this. All right. So I'm gonna start with this very simple dummy React app. So I'm gonna clone it. And there we go. So I'll CD into it. And then I have this new React project. But as you can see, there are no node modules. So it's a brand new React project. I don't have any of the dependencies locally. So I'm just going to look in the package JSON, and I can see that there are indeed some dependencies. So I can install those with npm install. So this, just like the requirements.txt in a Python project, it's just package.json allows you to, it describes all of the dependencies, and the package lock, as you remember, is the very detailed description. So you can, excuse me, depending on what you're doing, you can also include or exclude the package lock.json. Okay. So that should be good now. I'm just going to take a quick look here. We have an app.js. So this is just a dummy app, and we have our main app, and then we're using the router. We're using the hash router this time. And then we have two routes, stuff and things, which don't really do anything interesting except exist. And then, as usual, we can run this locally. So we do npm run start. My computer's been kind of slow the last couple of days. Should probably do some updates. Okay, so I can go here into my dev tools. And I can see everything right there. And then I can actually go to my route. So we're using a hash router, so we have to prefix everything with hash. And then I just pick one. And then I have a link here. I can go back to things. I can go back to stuff. So this is also changing. So this app works locally. So you can imagine you're developing your app, you get it working locally. Once you're confident that it works, then you're going to want to actually deploy it. Okay, so there's a couple things we have to do. First, before we get into that, I'm gonna say that we can't simply run it. So we could at this point, actually, maybe we'll go ahead and do that. I could just run this in a container using the development server, right? So just like I was doing here, the development server does work, right? It's a development server. I can serve up the application. But that's not really what you want to do in production. For reasons that you can imagine, it's not performant, it's not secure. You wouldn't be able to handle like HTTPS. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why you wouldn't want to run the development server in production, although you could. So I'll just go ahead and show that anyway. So what do we need? What kind of dependency do we need to run a React project locally? If you think about like what are the requirements on my computer right here to run a React application?
NPM.
Yeah, okay. NPM. Good.
Node.js or React Router DOM.
Yeah. So yes. So the short answer is that like the basic thing we need is Node. And then we can install the other stuff like React Router, all the dependencies for the project. So I'm going to go to Docker Hub and see if I can find an official image. So an official image is just an image. You can make your own images, and we have done that, and we'll do that. But an official image is usually something that you can rely on. So whoever makes Node is also responsible for this image. And there's a bewildering variety of versions that we could use. I can just pick one at random, LTS Alpine. I'll go ahead and use this one. So does anyone know what LTS means?
Long-term stable. It's like
Yeah.
the most, like the latest version they support. It's not a beta or anything.
Exactly. So it's usually, so this is not unique to Node, but projects will kind of have, they're constantly updating stuff. So they're constantly changing. So they're like the bleeding edge of the project keeps moving forward. And then they have this issue of, they want to keep moving and adding features and fixing bugs and keep, incrementing the version numbers. But there are people still using the older version for various reasons. So you have a question of like, well, what do you do with all these older versions? Do you go in and then maintain those versions separately? Or do you have like multiple tracks, like a repo with lots of different branches? And so that's obviously would require a ton of extra maintenance and everything. If you had to specifically maintain every single version on its own, like every single major version, for example, and also keep moving the whole project forward, be like simultaneously developing on every single branch of the project. So what people do as a kind of compromise is they'll kind of pick a version to be the long-term stable version, which means that they kind of guarantee like, we're going to keep updating this version of Node. You can see the most current version is like 19, but let's say, I'm just going to go to the Node page. And you can see if you go to the Node page, there's this is like the bleeding edge right here. And here it's a version lower. Sometimes it could be, several versions lower, but this is the long-term supported version. So this is what you probably should use by default, unless you really need the most recent thing. So the LTS. Can anyone tell me what Alpine is?
The lightweight version of Linux, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a lightweight version of Linux, and it's commonly used in Docker because it's lightweight. So you want your base image to be as small as possible. So I'm gonna copy this, and what I can do here is I can go. Let me see here. Just do. All right. So here. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and just run this image. So I do Docker. I make sure my the Docker is running. Docker run. And then I have this image. So I have node. That's the. That did not work. Let me try and actually copy this. So I can see that it's LTS-Alpine. So Docker run node. So node is the image, and then the version is LTS Alpine. So I can just run this, and it says it can't find it locally, so Docker will try to do as much caching as possible. So I don't. If you had just run this, before or recently, then it would probably be cached, and then you wouldn't have to download everything again. This will take a minute. And when I do run, so I'm actually kind of downloading it and running it at the same time. So this run will, before it actually runs, it will check if you have the image, and if you don't, it will download it. So you can download it separately, and then run it, or you can just run it in one command. Okay, so I ran it, and then it stopped. So the node container by default is not really going to do anything interesting when you run it. It's just a base image. So I can check this image. So I can do Docker PS, and Docker PS will check all of the currently running containers. So I don't have any containers currently running. I ran this, but it just basically executes a command. So you can see. Let's see. So this documentation tells you, like, if we're building an image, this is how you can do it. I just want to see where the actual command is. That's fine. So the command that this is going to run is just node, which is not going to do anything. So when you run an image, it will run whatever you set as the command cmd. And in this case, it's just node, which doesn't do anything, which is why the image just stops immediately. Okay, so to see so I have no currently running images. To see basically all of the instances of images that I have ever run and are currently on my computer, I do Docker ps-a, all. And then you can see I have some garbage here that I should clean up. But then this is hard to read, so I apologize. But here is the image that I just ran. So node LTS Alpine. And the container ID. So this is if I do, how can I see all the images that I have on my computer?
Docker ls.
Okay, yeah, close. It's Docker images. And it will show you all the images. And you can see if we find node V07 LTS Alpine. Yeah, so this is the individual ID of the container. You also get by default this dummy name, which is a random dummy name, which you can also use to reference containers. You can use either one. Okay, so now we have this image here, this LTS Alpine node image. So I just ran it and it did nothing. I can also run it and then connect to the shell and take a look and see what's inside the container. So basically, it's like SSHing into your container. So for that, you do Docker run and then the same basic command, node, and then I can be specific. I don't have any other node images, so this should work without it, but just to be sure, you can add LTS Alpine. So this is the base command, and we want to add a couple options or customizations. So we want access to the shell on the container. So for that, we're going to pass this flag -it. This will basically open up like a terminal. And then the command. So usually for most containers, you can use bash, but Alpine, in part because it's so small, it doesn't have bash. It has, so you just do sh. So that's just the difference with Alpine. And this will run the container. And then basically the -it flag with the shell command is going to run this command. So it's like direct access to the shell. So I can do ls, and now I'm inside of my container and I can see what's going on. So if I type node, I can see that this is the version, so version 18, blah, 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 and I can run JavaScript stuff here. So I'm in my container. So I could also have done something very similar if I created, like an EC2 instance and then SSH'd into that instance and installed Node. Then I could do the exact same thing. But I'm not doing it, far away. I'm doing it locally, but it's separate from the rest of my computer. So I'm just going to do, is it .exit, I think. Okay, so I'm out of the node interpreter, and now I'm back in my shell, and I'm also going to exit out of this container. So now I'm back on my actual computer here. Okay, so I have this container, but what I would like to do is run my application on this container. So for that, I have to create a Docker file. So I'm going to, inside the root level of the project, I'm going to create a Docker file. And every Docker file is going to start from some image. So from, and then I'm going to use node LTS, is it Alpine LTS? LTS Alpine, forget. LTS Alpine. Okay, so I'm starting from this image, and then what do I want to do? Well, I want to copy over my project, and then I want to run like npm run start. So I'm going to copy over the project. Well, before I do that, there's a few things that I should keep in mind. So what am I really trying to do here with this Docker image? I basically want to create an environment where I can run the development server of of my particular React app. So just like I ran it here, I want to do the same thing, but in this isolated environment. So what am I going to need? Well, I figured out I'm going to need Node. And then, so that's a general dependency. So I have an operating system, and then I have Node installed on it. Now I want to install all of the dependencies. So just like the first thing I did, I cloned down everything, and then I ran npm install. So I can do the exact same thing. So I'll do it that way, but the reality is I should probably break this up. So I'll just explain briefly why you shouldn't just copy over everything immediately and then install it. So you should ideally copy over the package JSON first, or the package lock JSON, depending on what you want to do, and then install everything there, and then in another step, actually copy over your project. And the reason you do that is because when Docker creates your image, it has different layers. So like what it calls layers, which are steps. So basically every step in your Docker file, every line in your Docker file is going to create another layer in your image. And Docker prefers to cache as much as possible, right? So if you've already used an image, then it caches it, and it's just real quick. If you install everything and you don't change your dependencies, then it won't re-pull those layers. So it will leave those base layers alone. And then if you, for example, change something in your application, it will just run everything from there forward. So actually, I'll just go ahead and do it that way. It's not that much more complicated. So first thing, we're going to copy. I'm going to create a working directory. So work dir, and this will be /app. This could be anything. So the working directory is basically every command I run is going to start from /app. So if this doesn't exist, it will create it in the container, and then every other command is going to assume that I'm here. So we don't have to do that in this case. You could just, I think we can install everything in the root, but we're going to do it this way. And then copy. I'm going to copy over package.json. So I'm assuming that I'm in the root layer here. So from I don't think I need this here. I'm going to copy the package.json, and then I'm going to run. And the command I'm going to run is npm run or npm install. So I've copied over this, which is just like the requirements.txt or whatever. This is going to just describe the dependencies, and then I'm going to install all the dependencies. And once I have that, then I can copy the rest of my project here. So copy. I will copy everything. So this is very simple. I'm going to take everything here and then just copy it over into the project. Now there's one slight issue, maybe a couple issues, but the main one is that I've just run npm install on the container, so it should have node modules already. So I don't want to copy my local node modules into the container. So this is the same issue we have with GitHub, right? I create a project. Basically, node modules should not really be shared. You should basically never share node modules. And we have the same problem with GitHub and the same basic solution, which is an ignore file. Instead of git ignore, there's something called a Docker ignore. We'll create that Docker ignore, and we'll just put node modules. So now when we copy everything, it will be, this first thing from to. So copy from everything in my current directory to my working directory. There's going to be a little asterisk here, which is going to be copy everything except for what's in the Docker ignore file. Okay, so we copy, we have our base image, our operating system with Node installed. We're going to copy over the package.json, which is going to describe our dependencies. We're going to install all those Node dependencies. And this is going to create another layer. So okay. And then we're going to copy over the application, and then let's do run. We will do run npm run start. And from here, if I happen to make changes to my application, then Docker will only we'll start from here. It won't rerun this. It won't have to install all your packages again. So that's a time saver. Okay, so it's going to run npm start. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to expose. So I don't think this is strictly necessary, but we'll just go ahead and add this. So I believe the React app is at 8080, the port that it runs on by default. Someone tell me if I'm wrong. So let's say 8080. So this is the port that we want to expose, and then cmd. This is the command that we want to run here. Actually, maybe we should put that there. Yeah, so when we actually start the container, the command that we want to run will go here. So in this case, we'll do npm run start. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's try building an image. So we have this description of an image. We're starting from a base image and we're creating another image. So to actually build the image, you do docker build, and then I'm going to give it a name. So we don't have to give it a name, but I'm going to give it a name so it's easier to keep track of, and that will be -t or tag, and I'll call this React node. And then dot, which means build whatever Docker file is in the current directory here. So I'm going to run that. And it's going to take a minute. It's going to download all this stuff and then run everything. So you can see this takes a minute, right? Just like it did on our computer. So here are the steps. So 1 through 5, you can see from blah, blah, it's going to pull the base image. Step 2 is this creating a working directory. Step 3, copy the package.json. Step 4, run npm install. So once this finishes, it will do the other steps. The nice thing about structuring it this way is if anything changes, it will invalidate the cache. So if you change the base image, then it has to start from scratch. It has to run everything again. If you change a dependency, it can keep the base image, but then has to rerun everything from the dependency change down. If you just change something in your application, all this stuff stays, it's cached, and it just runs from here down.
Hey, Chad, where line 10 expose 8080? Where does 8080 come from?
It should be the port, the default port. So no one corrected me, so I'm pretty sure it's 8080. But when you run the development server for React, it runs by default
Oh.
on 8080.
Oh,
that
the one
right?
it tells you? Oh, Mine says 3,000. I just wasn't sure.
Oh, 3,000. It is okay. Thank you. 3,000. So I'll have to rerun that, but everything else should be cached. So we'll see an example of that. This is pretty brutal. Okay, so so part of the reason I wanted to show you this is just, you know, kind of like the normal thing you could do, but in production, we're actually gonna do something a little different. But this will allow you to run basically a local version of your application in a separate environment, which, you know, may or may not be useful to you. So I've just finished this. It's taking a little longer than I would like.
Chad, would you mind just maybe giving an example of when we would do this, when we would want to use like a local version, like you just said?
Yeah. So um, so we'll see shortly when we actually when I actually do this properly in a minute, that we will end up having to run. So here's the script here. npm run build. So when you build a project, so React right now is just a bunch of like files and stuff, but if you actually want to serve it, you have to basically press it down into JavaScript, HTML, etc. So it will package everything, like your whole React application, and it'll package it up into some JavaScript, React, CSS files that you can serve as like static files. And in order to do that, you need this environment, right? You need Node and you need all your packages installed and everything like that. So what you would do really is you would do something called a multi-stage build, which is more complicated than I want to get into right now. But you can actually you could have this as the first part of your Docker file, where I need Node and I build it, and then I run npm run build, and it creates this file. And then as another step, I would actually do what we will do shortly, which is take that build file, combine it with a server like Nginx, and then run it.
Okay, thank you.
So, you know, this is part of what you would do, you know, in a if you were going all out here, but I don't want to introduce that complexity right now. Okay, so now this should be good. So I'm going to switch over to this window. It's a little bigger, and I'm going to do Docker images, and I can see that I have this right here. So I have this new image. Okay, so how do I run this image? I do Docker run React node. So that's the basic thing. But I don't want to just run it, because then I won't be able to access it. So it'll be running, and it'll be listening on port 3000. Actually, I think I need to redo this. So so let me run this again. So you can see that it should skip this other stuff. Please tell me you're skipping it. Right. So you can see all this cached. Cache work there, cached copy, cached, and then this is the real killer, cached all that stuff. It just had to change this, so should be good now. So I can run this command. So Docker images. And now this is using the latest So this kind of got, let's see, downgraded. So, so this basically replaced this one. So we can do Docker run React node, and we don't want to just run it. So we want to run it with a port. So a port mapping. So from our local machine to 3000. So I can pick an arbitrary port. I'll do 3002 to 3000. I could do the same one, but just to show you that this is my host machine, as in my laptop, and this is the container. So if I run that, so this is basically the output from my container at this point. You can also run it in a detached mode so that it runs in the background, so it's not taking up your, it's not using your shell. Okay. Starting, my computer's being very slow, so I apologize. Okay, so now I'm gonna hope this is working now, and I'm gonna go to localhost 3002, and there's my application running. I can go to, so I'm using the hash router, so stuff, things. So this works the same way. So I now have a container, and what I could do is I could take this image, and then I could create an EC2 instance, and then I could deploy it there, and I could actually run this, on the internet. I could run my development server on the internet, and it would work, but it could only handle one request at a time, and blah blah. So there's all kinds of limitations, so you wouldn't want to actually do that, but you could. All right, so how can we? Actually, why don't we take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back, and we'll do this for real. Okay, so we just built kind of a local, basically like a local development environment clone in Docker. So we could run our development server in this, a local development server in the Docker container that works for local development. So now we want to kind of upgrade this and actually have a production grade container where we can serve our application from. In order to do that, it will actually be, the Docker file will actually be simpler. But we're going to go to Docker Hub Nginx. So there are a few, servers. You don't have to use Nginx, but I'm going to use Nginx. And here's the official image build. And it also, like almost all images, will start from Alpine, or at least have the option of doing that. And you can see here's a README. So here's an example of Docker run. So -name. This is giving your instance a name, which you don't have to do. That's optional. And then -v, don't worry about that. That's a volume. We're not going to talk about volumes. And then -d, this means run in daemon mode, which basically means run in the background. So don't take up my shell. And then Nginx is the image. So Nginx by default, it will just pull Nginx :latest. So this is an example of how you could kind of run the Nginx server. Now, in order to actually, so here's an example, you're mapping the port. So the internal port 80, that's where Nginx is going to listen by default. You'll map it to your local port 8080. So there's a couple things. I'm not going to do like Nginx is a real server, so and you would want to configure it a little bit. Actually, for most purposes, I think the configuration is pretty minimal. But we're just going to use all the defaults, so we're not even going to have to worry about it. So as long as you do a couple things, Nginx will just by default serve an index.js file from a particular directory. So we can actually look that up. We'll need that in a second. Here is actually an example that tells you that. So from Nginx, this is like a minimal Docker file. And we're basically going to do this. So from Nginx, so we're going to start from a base Nginx image. We're going to copy wherever our static HTML stuff is. HTML, JavaScript, blah, 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 blah. And we don't have this yet, so we're going to have to make it. And we're going to copy that into the Nginx containers user share Nginx HTML. And this is just where Nginx happens to expect stuff to be. So by default, when you run the Nginx server, it's going to look in this directory to serve your static files. Okay, so we have a React application, but we don't have the static files yet. So how do we create the static files? You go to package.json and you run npm run build. So that's what we're going to do right now. And I'm going to do npm run build. And that is going to create another folder here called build. So it says creating an optimized production build. So it's going to take all of the JavaScript or all of the React, the React stuff that we did, and it's just going to turn it into what looks like a pile of garbage. It's going to be regular JavaScript, HTML, CSS. So here's what's in the build folder. You don't really need to worry about it. There's some things we're not going to use, but the index.html. So this is going to be the entry point for the application. So this index.html is kind of what is expected to be. So why don't we go ahead and, in fact, I'm just going to run the Nginx container so we can take a look around inside and see what's there. So I'm going to run. I'm not going to actually run it, but just to go inside of it. So I'm going to docker run, and I'm going to do the Alpine image because it'll be smaller. I'll just use this. And I'll do that here. So docker run nginx Alpine. And I'm going to want to use the shell. So -it, that's will give me an interactive terminal. And then sh, I have to use sh, not bash, because it's Alpine. And I'm pretty sure I have, yeah. So I should have this already locally, so I shouldn't have to go through the entire process. Some things should be cached. My computer is incredibly slow. Okay, so there we go. I'm now, I've SSH'd into my container, so to speak. Do ls. And I'm going to go see where is that directory that's by default going to serve the static files. Where is that? Here we go. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to cd into it. Cd ls. And you can see that by default, there's this index.html. So we can take a look at that. And here's this. So if you see this page, blah, 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 it's working. And what we're going to do basically is replace this default index.html file with our index.html file, which got created by running npm run build. Okay, so I'm going to exit from this container. take longer than it should. All right, so now I'm back on my shell, and I'm just gonna run. I'm just gonna run this just to show you. So do sorry, np or not npm docker run this, but I'm not gonna run. I don't want to go in. I actually want to run it for real. So I'm gonna map ports. So 80, 90 for no particular reason. So Nginx is going to listen on port 80, but I'm just going to say I want on my local machine to access it through port 8090. So I'm going to run this, and it should serve me up this default HTML thing that they have. Okay, so there we go. And because I did not run it in daemon mode, I have access to everything. So this is taking up my shell, but I can see the logs, which is nice. Okay, so now I'm going to go to local host 8090, and there I'm getting that Nginx HTML, which is the same thing as here. Okay, so that is working. I'm going to Control C. Okay, so now I'm back on my terminal. All right, here we go. So I've prepped my React project to be deployed by running npm run build, and you can look in the static files, and here's where everything's going to end up getting created, and it's just totally unreadable. It's minimized and some other processing, so you don't need to. You shouldn't need. You should not mess with anything here, but that's where it is. So now we're going to create a Docker file, and instead of copying over, everything here, we just want to copy over the build, and we want to copy the build into here. So let's go ahead and create a Docker file which does that. So the base image is going to be Nginx Alpine. And then once I do that, I'm going to copy build. And copy over this build directory. It should be in the same. Where's my Docker? No, sorry. Yeah, so the Docker file should be at the root of the project. Here's the old one, by the way. I just kept it there. Okay, so copy build into what? We could create a working directory, but we don't actually need to. I'm going to copy it into here. And that's basically it. That's pretty much all we need to do. So I'm going to create an image based on this. And then when we run it, it should, instead of serving up the default HTML, it should serve up our React application. So I'm going to do, I'll build it here. So Docker, so we're going to create an image, build, and I'm going to give it a name. This will be React Docker. And then, so build-t, and then dot. So this is where the Docker file is located, as long as I'm in the root project, which I think I am, and that should work. So this is doing all of its stuff. And I think some of this I had cached. I had previously downloaded this image, so this is cached for me. It probably won't be for you. And I copied everything over. And so now I have an image. So if I'm going to go to this other terminal and do Docker images, I can check that this actually got created. So this is now created. so I can run it. So I will do something very similar. So I'm just going to do Docker run and then the image name React Docker. That's the base command, and then I'm just going to map the ports P8090 just like I did before to the internal port 80, which it should be listening on by default. I'm also going to pass it this flag. This is purely just for convenience. So this will delete the image after you're done with it, so you don't have to clean it up later. Not the image, but the instance. Okay, so Docker run. We'll clean it up when we're done, and then run it. We'll map the Docker, the containers port 80 to the my computer's port 8090, and we'll run this. I think that should be good. Okay, so I'm getting the server logs. Again, I could run it in daemon mode if I don't want to see all this stuff, but now I should be able to go here and get a different. So now I have my actual application there. So slash. And I can switch back and forth. But this time, you can't really tell, but I'm running it on a real, production grade server. So I'm running this on Nginx. This is not a development server. So this is deployable right now. This is deployable, so let's deploy it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, just like GitHub, I have an image which is ready to go. It's ready to be deployed. I've developed, I've run it locally, I've tested it. I'm sure that it works. So I'm going to push it up to my personal Docker Hub account. Let's stop this. I'm going to push it up there so that I can access it from the server that I'm going to create, or anywhere. So anyone on my team could also pull that image down on their machines and run it. So Docker images, let's check this one more time. And one tweak that I'm going to have to make is, so I have to basically prefix this name with my account. So I'm going to do that. So Docker tag, so you can rename it. So React Docker, and I'm going to rename it to Chad Mowbray. This is my Docker Hub account name, and then React Docker prod. I think that's all I need to do. And Docker images. Okay, so once I have that, I'm gonna push it up to my account. So Docker push, and then that, I think that's all you have to do. And it's going to push up this image. So if once this finishes in a couple seconds, if any of you want to pull this down, image down, you can do Docker pull that, and it should pull down. Oh wow, yeah. So this already exists here, so it's not going to actually do it. Again, it's checking, it's smart. But you guys can do that. So this is publicly available. So anyone on my team could pull this down and run it, and they could make sure that it works, etc. Okay, so that is now, I have my application, it's developed, it's packaged up in an image, it runs, I can check it, it's available anywhere. So now I'm actually going to create the server and then run the application on my server. So you've seen this a couple times. I'm going to go to AWS account. Yes. Sign in the console. I'm just going to put it off to the side. I do this real quick. Okay. So I'm in my account and I want to create an EC2 instance. So you may not have this here, but you can go into services and then you can look for recently visited. I'm going to do a search for EC2. There we go. Okay, so here's my EC2. So EC2 is just a computer. It's a virtual computer, probably very similar to what we're actually doing with a container here locally. And we're gonna launch an instance. And I'm gonna give this an arbitrary name, so React server. And then I'm going to just use the defaults here. So Amazon Linux base image, that works nicely. I'm going to keep the defaults. If you're using an M1, yeah, if you're using an M1, let me know. There's a slightly different builds command that you'll have to use. It's not that big of a deal. It's just a slightly different one. It's actually in another README, I believe. Let me just check that real quick. So yeah, some of this stuff is also going to be in the other READMEs. This is repeated, but that's fine. Maybe it was in one of the challenges. Sorry, just give me 1 sec. Did I make a note of that? I'm pretty sure I made a note of that, but there's a build. Let me just try to look this up. Docker build X. Yeah, you'll have to run basically a command like this when you build it. If you have an M1 chip, because you want to run, you're probably going to run on just a normal Linux architecture. So you'll just have to build it right here. So Docker build X build platform, blah, blah, blah. And then -t, the tag, you give it a name. And then, so everything is basically the same. You just have to have a slightly longer command.
You think that's also the same for the M2 chips?
It probably, yeah. I'm not, I actually know basically nothing about computer hardware, but it's probably the same. You can try it, and if it doesn't work, then that's probably the issue. Okay, so I have a very old Mac, so I don't have to worry about this. But yeah, Amazon Linux and architecture, you might be able to just, yeah. And then the instance type. So this is free. This is free. Stay on the free tier unless you really want to do something different. And then the key pair login. So this is going to allow you to SSH into your container and prevent other people from doing that. So I'm going to create a new key pair. And I can give it whatever name. React server key. And the defaults are fine. Create key pair. It's going to create this thing right here, which I'm just going to pull down the desktop. You can take a look at it if you want. Again, you would never show this to anyone. Okay, never mind. I'm not going to do that. Okay, so we have the key and network settings. So I'm going to allow SSH traffic from my IP. You could do anywhere, that's fine, but I'll just do it from my IP. It's more secure. And then we're not going to worry about HTTPS traffic right now. We just care about HTTP traffic. So this is going to allow any incoming traffic on the port 80 of our machine. Okay, And then storage, that should be fine. So launch instance. All right, so this will take a minute to build. We can go here at the detail view and see what's happening. Okay. This will take a minute, but I'm just going to go ahead and click into here. And here's the public. So once this actually gets up and running, which it should be, in a minute, it's running now. Here's the public address. So this is what you would go into the search bar, and by default, it'll be port 80, and we're listening on port 80. So that will be perfect. So I want to, before I do that, so I just have this base image running. The server is running. My EC2 instance is up, but it's not doing anything interesting. So we want to install Docker and then run our container. So I'm going to go to connect. We'll have to SSH into the into there. So we're gonna have to run this command first. So I just threw this on my desktop through my key pair there. So that's where it will be. You just have to run these commands in the same directory as your certificate, as your key. Okay, and then, so I've changed the permissions there, and then I should be able to just copy this and run it. I'll type yes. And now I'm actually on, I'm on the remote server. So just like, I had a Docker container, you can SSH into it, connect to the terminal. This is the same thing. So ls. There's really nothing going on here. So we have to install, let's install Docker. So I think that is here. Just a couple commands you have to run right here. And install Docker. Yes. And then let's start it. Change this just so you don't have to prefix all your Docker commands with sudo. And then I'm going to exit and then come back in, and everything should be good. So Docker images. Okay, cool. It's running. So now what I want to do is pull down the image that I just pushed up. What did I call that? Forget what I called it now. Let's go up here. I should probably be able to go to my Docker home account. Don't happen to remember the name of the container? Anyway, Docker pull. I'll take a guess.
I got it. It's yeah, and then / hold on one second. React dash Docker dash prod prod. Yeah, that's it right there.
Thank you very much.
I pulled it, it worked. So
Okay, cool. So now we should have this here on the server. So Docker images. Okay, so it's here. So last thing we have to do is actually run it. So I'm going to do Docker run. But I don't want to just run it. I'm still going to map the ports. So P, but this time I'm going to map to 80. So 80, 80. So because I'm accepting incoming connections, normal HTTP connections on port 80, so I'm going to map it to 80. And that should be it. Okay, so now, excuse me, I'm going to try to connect here. I'm going to copy this. Make sure you're not doing HTTPS. If you do HTTPS, it won't work because we're not doing that. And then I'm going to go //things. And now I'm running my application on the internet. So if you go to this address, you can do the same thing. So that is it. We've seen this basic workflow a few times now, especially the creating an EC2 instance. So hopefully it's not too intimidating at this point. Yeah, are there any questions about Docker or creating an EC2 instance, anything like that?
Yes, so the reason you used the Nginx was basically to have a place to put your static files, and that's why that's better than using your local machine as an instance.
Yeah, so you could use the local development server, but it's not meant for anything. So the Nginx server it does a lot of work for you. It's also configurable, so when you actually if you want to do other things, it's a lot easier to do. But it's going to handle things like multiple connections at the same time, and so if you want to, if you just have like one person at a time making requests to your application, and you don't want it to be secure or anything, then it's fine. But yeah, so Nginx is going to handle things like basically lots of incoming traffic, and it can also handle certificates, HTTPS. There's also lots of other more complex things you can do, like creating like a proxy and other stuff, which we're not going to do.
Does this image stay running on the EC2 instance, or is it only running while you have it up on your local computer?
No, it should be running. So
you can exit out of everything and
yeah, it should be able to exit out. It would also maybe be smarter to run it in daemon mode here, but if I actually exit out of this, it will. So let me see. So it should still be running. Let me try. Yeah, so I think we're still running there. But yeah, you're right. You would probably want to run it in daemon mode.
Cool.
Try to connect. So yeah, I think if I do Docker logs, Docker PS. So if you do Docker PS, you can see that it's running.
So it's always running on this cloud instance, no matter what you do after.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
and you can access until something breaks. But you can. So this is where there are things like we're not going to get into it, but there are services like container orchestration services. Like there's something called Docker Swarm, and Kubernetes is the major one, where you basically describe an entire, if I want to have like 10 of my React servers and a bunch of databases and blah blah blah, you describe what you want that the whole application to look like, and you can scale up and down. And if a container becomes unhealthy or dies, you can kill it and then create another one and so on. So it'll like automatically handle that kind of management stuff. And we'll see later, not today, but we'll see Docker Compose. So that's what we're going to use to coordinate multiple containers on a single computer here. Okay, any questions? Okay, so the challenge for today is going to be, let me go back to the curriculum. So this is the, what you should use for reference. Create and deploy a prototype of your personal project. So create a React application. It doesn't have to be, it's just a prototype, just an idea. Maybe sketch out some stuff if you want to try playing around with an API or anything you want to do, but just get some kind of basic prototype of React application going and Dockerize it and then deploy it. So you're gonna have to plan for that because you have till the end of the day to get something deployed, basically. So plan out how much time you're gonna need for the different steps, and if you need help or anything, please let me know. Ask in the channel because people are gonna have similar issues. So first, ask in the channel, and then if other people haven't had the same issue, I will happily jump in with you. And then if you also want to discuss, let me stop recording.